So what really is a classical education? It's a topic I want to very briefly address presently, and it's a many splendored thing, and it's a multi-dimension thing that encompasses not just what people typically think of as the classics having to do with Greco-Roman civilization. I think it's a lot broader than that. But for now, why don't we just talk briefly about that Greco-Roman civilization? And let me begin with a story I experienced that I can relate. A number of years ago, I was interviewing a guy for a teaching position, and he had misrepresented his qualifications, and I was talking to him about what a school offered and what what I taught, and I mentioned that I taught Latin, and what he did, which I thought curious from a guy who was doing an interview. He said, "Well, why are you teaching a dead language?" And my reply was that, of course, it's not a dead language. And he said, "Oh, really?" And I said, "Yeah." So I went through the usual etymological explanations of why Latin was not a dead language. So I picked a couple of words and I said, if you take dictionary, that's derived from the Latin verb dico dicere, which means to speak or to talk, and that's why we call dictionaries what we call them. Malediction is a curse, to speak evilly of someone. So hopefully he found it illuminating. Obviously, he didn't get the job, but Latin as a language is at the core, of course, of a classical education, as is ancient Greek. But it's not the only thing, and it may not be the most important thing. Because the lingua franca of Latin transcended not Rome, the Republic, and the Empire, and it transcended the Middle Ages. And a lot of people don't know that. And so here, when I'm teaching Latin or teaching history or whatever it happens to be I'm teaching, I mention the ubiquity of the Latin culture. By Latin culture, I mean the Roman classics, Roman political ideas, the medieval church, theological ideas. And people sometimes understand that, or they're aware of it. What they're not aware of oftentimes is how Latin culture, i.e. classicism and a classical education, leads ultimately into something that is oftentimes not associated with a classical education, and that's science. I assume that you have heard of the scientific revolution, which officially, of course, there are antecedents, began in 1543 with the publication of De Revolutionibus by Nicholas Copernicus, who had Latinized his name. He was Polish in origin. And he was the man who suggested the overthrow of the Ptolemaic system, namely the Earth-centered system, and suggested that the sun is at the center of the then somewhat smaller universe than ours, and that the Earth revolved around that sun. And what did he write his book in? He wrote his book in Latin. Why did he write his book in Latin? Because he wanted to be read. He wanted to be understood. He wanted to have as large an audience as he could. And the scientific revolution was something that continued in that vein through Kepler with his Astronomia Nova, where he talked about the discovery of new stars and his planetary motion laws, and went on to the very apex of the scientific revolution, namely Isaac Newton with his Principia, where he unified heaven and earth with the same principles and physical laws, whereas before it had been differentiated between what applies to the earth and what applies to the heavens. All this was done in the heritage of a classical education. All those men were educated in the classics, Roman and Greek. Their concept of the importance of science was something that was of that, what was due to that heritage. So that gives one a beginning of an inkling of the importance of a classical education, usually with something that's not necessarily or immediately thought of, i.e., the growth of science in Western civilization and the spread of science throughout the world. And that is not to begin to mention of the political importance of a classical education. The American experiment politically is derivative from Athens, but primarily from the Roman Republic. And it's in the Roman Republic and the study of the Roman Republic that we can see our origins and some of our problems that we face today. And so Rome lost its republic in a period of division and violence. And here we are in America at a time of division. Of course, we've experienced a bit of violence, not quite as bad as the Roman Republic in the 1st century BC. But who knows? So we see warning signs of the fragility of representative and democratic and republican forms of government. I think that's another reason that we study classics. And that is, of course, just the tip of the iceberg. So if you look at the ancient Greeks, the origins of history itself as a subject, as an academic subject, is Greek, and the origin of that concern and that interest were the Persian Wars, where Athens and the rest of the Greek city-states defended themselves against Persian aggression. And how did they defend themselves? By coming together and heroically defending their culture on the battlefield against the Persians. All that resulted in the continuance of Greek liberty, and it also gave motivation for the creation of history as we understand it. If you read an ancient Greek history text, you will recognize it as historical in ways that are completely different from previous civilizations, including the Egyptian and all the Mesopotamian ones. Thus, Herodotus, the father of history, and his more sophisticated disciple, historically, Thucydides, with his history of the Peloponnesian War. So I think that's a good introduction to why classical education can be important and ought to be sought after up until this very age. And I think that's all I have to say about that, because if I get into further details and further applications of classical education, I'll go way over my time. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed that.